Really excited about the next session, both the moderator and the wonderful speaker that we have. So Julia Hartz, the co-founder of Eventbrite, which is, like Danae, a company that we've been very close to at Women 2.0 from its early days. In fact, Eventbrite is the only ticketing platform we've ever used, and we love it. It's the way we sort of transact all of our attendees like yourself to all our global events around the world. So I will let Lindsay, who's conducting this session with Julia, to introduce Julia a little bit more. But to tell you about Lindsay, she is actually the senior editor at Inc. magazine. And the fun fact is we're getting the chance to get to know Inc. magazine a little bit more this year, having the chance to work with them on a couple of projects. So stay tuned for that. But like Women 2.0, what we love about Inc. is it's a very authentic and empowering voice and an interesting view of business that we don't always see online. And so that's that common point, that common brand is what brings Inc. and Women 2.0 together. So cheers to high quality content. But a little bit more about Lindsay. As a senior editor at Inc., she covers technology and innovation. Previously, she was the senior editor at CBS Interactive. And before that, she was a reporter with Business 2.0 magazine, which for those of you who've heard me on stage before know that that was the magazine I was obsessed with in college. And it's why I'm actually in the Valley. I used to read it obsessively and thought, what's all these cool things happening? I gotta go to the city where this is happening. So Business 2.0 is the reason why I'm standing here today. But anyway, we're excited to have Lindsay here from Los Angeles. So with that, I'd like to bring both Lindsay and Julia to the stage. Sorry, trying to grab my gear.
Such a warm welcome.
Yes, please join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to
Welcome
see
back.
you.
Good to see you.
Should we sit on?
I'm going to go put my clothes on.
Two couches?
Sure.
Okay, I've been warned that we cannot sit backwards or we may topple over. So
Okay.
Don't do that.
I'm going to perfect the art of sitting in a short skirt. That was
Right. We're going to work on our posture while we're doing this.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so I'm assuming that everyone has at least some passing familiarity with Eventbrite. You all used Eventbrite to get into this conference. So
we don't want to assume anything.
We'll start at the beginning. So because it is Valentine's Day, and everyone is doing the reference to Valentine's Day, I thought we could start at this topic from the angle of, I think starting a business is really an act of love. I mean, it's an act of courage, of course, but you put everything into it. It's really an act of love. So I wanted to start by having you tell us your startup love story, how you got into Eventbrite.
Sure. So Kevin, my co-founder and husband, and I tend to refer to Eventbrite as our passion, and then our two little girls as our love. And actually our world
I like that distinction.
our life is very binary. It's about those two things and not much else. So when I think about Eventbrite, I think of the story of finding our passion and growing a company that is full of passion. And so the story starts back in 2005. I was a television executive at MTV and then FX Networks in LA. And met Kevin at a wedding. And I got to live vicariously through him for about 2 years as we were dating quasi-long distance San Francisco to Los Angeles. And I was in my world in entertainment, and my world was all about content. And I got to experience vicariously through him the world of innovation. And it was not too long before I realized I was in the wrong industry for myself. Okay. And so what I was craving was this velocity that I saw in Silicon Valley. And so I started to look at ways in which I could integrate the two and take my skills to San Francisco. And I came very close to joining the Current TV team, and they were just a startup as well. And right before I signed an offer with that team, Kevin came to me and said, you can go join another startup and work for years on somebody else's dream, or perhaps there's something that we can dream up together. And it was really kind of caught me by surprise.
Now the chain of events was will you marry me? And,
Yes.
oh, by the way, will you start this company with me?
Right? It was, well, we'd never been in the same room at the same time for more than 2 days because we had this sort of like weekend love affair. So it was, will you marry me? We moved in together. Will you start a company together? And then, so we started Eventbrite in January of 2006, sort of the official launch, and then June of 2006 we got married.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think at this point, it's easy to kind of look back. 2006, you started. Now, you have these crazy growth statistics. Just to give the audience a little bit of a taste for this, last year you passed the $2 billion gross sales mark, which is huge. Not only that, but 25% of that was generated in a 6-month period. Mm-hmm. So huge growth. It's very easy at this point, maybe for me and some of us, to sort of look back and say, oh, well, they disrupted, the tickets marketplace, and they always sort of intended to do that. But I'm curious, how intentional was the idea? Did you sit down and say, okay, A, we're going to disrupt an industry, and B, it's going to be tickets?
Pretty much. I think that our passion really was around the idea of disrupting through innovating around the long tail, bringing a solution to anybody. And when I say long tail, I mean all the events that typically weren't on a big ticketing platform or that the organizers were using Excel spreadsheets and email. In the early days, especially when we went to go raise our first round of funding in 2009, we were asked that question, who are your competitors? And we would say Excel spreadsheet and email, because previously nobody had a solution, much less an innovative, robust solution to gather people around a live experience like today. This is absolutely, this experience right here is why we created Eventbrite and is still our core audience. So yes, we're very proud of the 2 billion and growing mark, but I think what I'm more excited about is that there have been over 160, we've helped sell over 160 million paid tickets on the Eventbrite platform. And even just last year, over 1 million live experiences happened on the platform. And that is a testament to our growth in that long tail, our focus on enablement, rather than going after, trying to go after the big guys and take on, say, a Ticketmaster.
Okay. So staying sort of in the early days period here for a minute. Now, you guys did not beta test anything, right? You flipped the switch and you were live to every corner of the interwebs. Thinking now back on that decision, would you do that now if you had to do it over again?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I really admire about our team is that we do, and we learn by doing, and sometimes that creates all sorts of interesting situations. But in the beginning, our beta testers were our early adopters, and our early adopters were people like Shaharos and the tech community. And there's no better early adopter cohort than the tech community, because they'll tell you exactly what they think. And they'll actually, I feel like we crowdsource the development of our site, because I would spend my time all the time talking to customers. I was the customer service department for 2 years, and I would filter the feedback that I gleaned from our users who are actually using the product and telling us about their pain points, and I would give those to Kevin. He would develop the product, and then our third co-founder, Renaud, a very brave man, would build what Kevin had designed, and we would all QA. And that's literally how Eventbrite was built in the first 2 years. We didn't hire anybody. We bootstrapped the company. We didn't pay ourselves salaries, so it was a bit risky. But I think that all those elements kind of helped us be really focused on what matters most, which to us is product and customer.
Now, one of the most interesting facts I came across when I was researching for this interview is that Eventbrite was not always called Eventbrite. It was called Mollyguard?
It's like a skeleton in the closet. Yes.
What is the story with that?
So I'll try to make this really brief. So Kevin, his history is he's a serial entrepreneur, so Eventbrite is actually his third company that he has co-founded. And his previous co-founder, Alan Braverman, was I'm going to mess this up. I think it was the University of Illinois where they actually created Netscape. And he went there, and in the lab they had this big switch that if you flip the switch, it would kill everything. And like the IBM tech workers would have to come out to reboot the systems. And the professor at this university had a little girl named Molly. And she actually would run around on the weekends in the lab. And as you can imagine, she flipped the switch. And after she did that 2 times, they created this thing called a Molly guard that was basically that plastic box that lives over a switch that you care about. So it was called a Molly guard. And so when Kevin and Alan were creating a bunch of different ideas, the blanket name for the company was Molly guard. And one of the ideas they had in the very early days was this notion of ticketing. And so because we were just sort of tooling around with ideas, we never quite changed, well, we changed the name by the time we launched, but it was Molly Guard for a certain amount of time. And Molly has graduated college, and I'm sure is brilliant.
That's a great
going
story.
On.
Okay, so you started to talk a little bit about getting customers, and when I was out here in the audience and sort of asking some of the attendees, what do you want to hear from Julia? Overwhelmingly, people want to know how you scaled Eventbrite. Mm-hmm. So let's start with getting your first customers. What were the biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenges in the beginning is that you don't scale. You don't see scale. I mean, very few companies immediately scale, and that presents in itself, when you look at these hyper-growth stories, huge challenges. So actually, when I think about how Eventbrite has grown over the years, I'm really grateful that we've taken an iterative approach and that we've had this sort of incremental growth. And so in the beginning, we had a community that was around us, and that was very beneficial, as I outlined before. But I think that the scariest part is when you as an entrepreneur want to see, if you're in the tech field, you especially want to see mass scale. You want to sort of, and the reason why we created a self-service platform was because we wanted anybody to be able to use Eventbrite anytime without having to call us. And quite literally, it was almost like a personal decision. Kevin and I are horrible at sales, and I truly am not that great on the phone. So we wanted to be able to create this really friction-free model where anybody could use the service. And our thesis was that would actually that would sort of fuel the scaling of the business. But in the beginning, you ask yourself, how am I going to get more customers beyond this initial group? And our original idea was that events are social; they're inherently social, and you want people to go to events with you. And so through event invitations and awareness of events, people would become aware of Eventbrite. And we got laughed at a lot around that notion because it was so simplistic, and it was sort of like, yeah, but how are you going to go viral?
This was the tech community laughing at you, or
I would say it was more that when we were out pitching the business for funding, that was more sort of I guess maybe they weren't actually literally laughing, but I think that I felt like there weren't a lot of people who believed that notion, and that it seemed a little bit like a pipe dream that we would be able to build this virtuous cycle where people would be invited to an Eventbrite event, attend an event, and then later down the road become an organizer. And I'll just give you the punchline. I know we're focusing on the beginning, but 37% of our new organizers are attendees first. So that virtuous cycle is alive and well, and it's our #1 driver of new event organizers.
So how much did you have to nudge customers to sort of spread the word, or would you say that it happened more organically?
It happened quite organically, but the inflection point was really the advent of the newsfeed. I think for us,
Facebook, you're talking about.
Yeah. And Twitter too. I mean, we have strong stats on both, but I think it was really the beginning of the Facebook Connect era. We were the first users of the Events API, and actually Dave Morin, who worked on that product, is on our board. But that's way back in early 2008. We met with them and realized that Eventbrite sort of sits at the intersection of social commerce. I mean, it's one of those things where you want to share where you're going. And at the time, Facebook was very focused on filling the newsfeed with real-life events. And so we developed the Events API with them and connected so that both organizers could push their events to Facebook, and also, more importantly, attendees could share where they were going, and you would have a nice transaction flow from there. And that was the inflection point for us because it was huge.
So I think you're pointing to something really important in the growth of a business, which is at a certain point you were looking at the analytics, you were noticing, right, that people were actually physically copying and pasting their Eventbrite information onto Facebook.
Yes.
And you sort of noticed that's where your customers were going. At the same rate, are you ever concerned that you're not wedded necessarily to a platform too much, but is Facebook still one of your biggest drivers?
Yeah, so it's a good question. When you find something like that, and first of all, the advice I'd say in terms of how you find those inflection moments is to just stay acutely observational. We love to follow our users' behavior, and we follow them. We notice their patterns. And you told a very important part of the story, which is that before we even integrated with Facebook, we noticed that Facebook was becoming one of the top 10 drivers of traffic to our site.
And what year was that?
That was in 2007.
Okay.
So people were manually cutting and pasting their event details into Facebook, and so we captured that. We optimized on that immediately to be able to, see that growth and make it a more natural behavior. But the obvious question is, well now what? There were moments, and I'm sure many of you remember, where some businesses were built on the Facebook platform and were codependent. But for Eventbrite, we're not dependent on any platform other than the human need to connect through live experiences. So if that goes away, if Maslow's hierarchy of needs changes, then we're screwed. But for us, it's about, we will always find the channel in which people are sharing where they're going and sharing content like live events. And so, yes, I will be completely transparent. We're a very transparent company. Facebook is still our #1 driver of traffic. But if it weren't Facebook, it would be wherever people are spending the most amount of time sharing information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's switch a little bit to the real kind of growth phase of Eventbrite. I mean, for the first 2 years, it was just the 3 of you.
Yeah, very
right?
quaint and cozy. Renaud was in Paris, so we did everything really wrong. Yeah,
two of you in the same room anyway.
Yeah, it was a windowless conference room. We graduated from a phone closet to a windowless conference room, and we were in a space that actually was this sort of organic incubator of sorts. It was a bunch of founders that got together through the person who owned the building, and it was this incredible era because out of that one little space came Flixster, TripIt, Eventbrite, OPower, and Zynga had a desk there for a hot second, and Trulia. So we were all together during this time, and of course you don't know what's going to happen, but I think that being contrarian to what people suggest you do in terms of starting a company with your significant other and having a co-founder who's overseas, it really helped fuel our need to succeed. And I actually think in hindsight now that probably contributed towards our focus and our drive to make this actually a long-standing independent company.
So I think 2009 was the year. You got to a point where I think you were at 15 people, and the goal was to actually triple your staff in 1 year.
Yeah, we were 30 people at the end of it. Yeah.
Okay, so huge growth. Yeah. Logistically, how do you do that?
Right.
How do you change your hiring processes so that you can bring on so many people at once?
So that moment was my first, I don't love the term aha, but it was really kind of this epiphany for me, which was that we had gone out, we had been turned down. This is a part of the story that not many people know. We had gone out and tried to raise money in 2008, such a wonderful year to raise money, and we had been turned down by everybody. So then we left everybody with our 2009 plan. So then at the end of 2009, we went back to the VC community, and everybody had our plan, and we showed them our results, which was better than our original plan. And that resonated well with the community. So we raised money from our first choice, which was Sequoia Capital. And with that money, we raised $6.5 million. And with that money, we knew that where we wanted to go and who we needed to get us there. So we were a group of 30, and we were about to grow into a company of 100. And that scared the shit out of me. I mean, I was paralyzed with fear because I didn't know what a company looked like. I only knew what this group of people looked like. And I had seen a lot of other companies go through hypergrowth in terms of headcount and come out the other end just torn to tatters or with an identity that they didn't mean to create. And so through that fear, I also realized that I felt unconditional love for the company. And so I figured, I might as well die trying to make something really great happen out of this growth. And so the first thing I did was think about who we were. And I think Danae nailed the culture talk. So I'm not going to, it's like ditto on everything she said. But I tried to understand our identity. And through an exercise that we did around branding, we were able to understand how our users viewed us. And we had this list of brand tenets like accessible, genuine, empowering. And I decided to repurpose those as our culture tenets because that list actually described the group of people that were in the room. And those two things are absolutely intrinsically linked, as Danae talked about. And so we set out to hire the next 70 with those brand tenets as our sort of core of what we were looking for on the culture fit side. And I also was lucky enough to hire an amazing director of recruiting who's still with us today. And together we just sort of went out and it's all, to be honest, it's all a blur, but I feel like it was the Renaissance era for Eventbrite that year of 2010. That was incredible.
Okay, now there is one culture story that I would really like you to tell because I think it's incredibly instructive. At a certain point, Briteland, as you like to call it, was a lovely place to work.
Yes.
Tons of perks. People were very, very happy. But you woke up one morning after having had a dream and everything sort of changed.
Yeah, so
Tell us about that.
we grew from 30 to 100 in 2010 and then 100 to 200 in 2011. And this was in 2011, and I was actually like 10 months pregnant. So I think it was like 4 days before I was about to have our second child. And I realized that, so a couple things had happened. One, like a Business Insider article had come out that had labeled Eventbrite as the Disneyland of workplaces. And then two, we were about to miss our plan for the first time ever. And so along with massive pregnancy, I had like all those combined to create this realistic nightmare, which was Ruloff from Sequoia saying, "Congratulations, you've created the happiest, most mediocre company on the planet." Which is totally something he would say. No, it was a dream. And I woke up in a cold sweat, and I thought, wow, that was really scary. And to me, that was my own wake-up call of you can have the happiest company that can also miss its plan. And that the two, success and driving forth your own goals and your own vision, is incredibly important to overall happiness. Again, just like Danae like beautifully outlined. And so that was my wake-up moment to really think about how to start sort of elegantly introducing this notion of high performance into a really happy culture. And that was the start of a new phase for me in terms of my focus, and it's a huge challenge.
Yeah, these were not easy times, right? I mean, you had to make some hard decisions.
We did, but it's interesting. If you do it thoughtfully and intentionally, and I call it elegantly, but if you don't try to throw a bucket of ice water in people's faces, which is like almost the easier thing to do, like here's our new set of performance criteria,
yeah, like just conform or you're out.
Yeah, if you actually are thoughtful about it, it happens over a longer period of time. I mean, I'm still in it. But it's much more sustainable, and it resonates with your team. And overall, I think what we've done in the past few years at Eventbrite is build trust. And that trust is extremely important to me, and I will do nothing to break it. But of course, sometimes when you have to make tough decisions, especially on the hiring or on the firing side, you kind of have to trust that trust, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Okay, we are running out of time. I could talk to you for like
hook us off stage.
I know, a few hours. So I want to open it up to the audience and see what our attendees want to ask you.
Cool. Otherwise, we could just do
See
point.
a hand right over there.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Jessie Fowler. Nice to meet you. Thanks for your talk. You've used Eventbrite since 2007, and I just want to thank you for everything.
Wow, thank
we
you. You're a
produce
power user.
conferences, and we couldn't have done it all without you. We've grown, scaled amazingly because of Eventbrite. But I run our business with my husband also, and I don't know how much everybody wants to get into personal stuff with the conference today, but just wondering how you guys manage to run a business together. My husband's our communications director. I'm the managing director, so it's always kind of hard to be married to your business partner. But if you have any thoughts on, how you guys have dealt with that over the years, how you've scaled and kept your, infighting and work not at home, all
You guys
that
don't
stuff.
fight, right? No.
Great question. So we have a motto that we were given very early on by our great friends and mentors of sort, Michael and Sochi Birch, who created Bebo and a whole host of other businesses together, and they still really like each other. So they told us to divide and conquer, to never work on the same thing at the same time for preservation of your relationship, but also to get from point A to point B 2 times faster. And so we've actually stuck to that almost 100%. And when we've broken that motto, it's a disaster. And it does cause friction. And the other point is that for Kevin and I, we don't know any different. I would be more worried about us not working together than working together in terms of our relationship. But I think we're also, you kind of hone your skills of leading a company and not making people uncomfortable or not bringing your relationship to work. However, we're very open. I mean, everybody knew that I was pregnant right when I announced it to the world. The whole company knew, we have a banter at work that's appropriate, but also just very lighthearted. And I think that you have to choose your own route for yourself, but for us, it's just sort of our whole world is kind of intrinsically linked. But it's definitely not for everybody. Now that you've been married almost 7 years, and we've been married 7.5 years, and I feel like I can understand why people say they could never imagine starting a business with their spouse, because if we were thinking about that now, I don't know if I'd be so keen on it. So, just to be honest.
Any other questions? I've got more questions
Oh, I think
for
I
you.
see
So
a
I can keep
hand.
going. Oh, yeah, okay. Can't see.
Hard to see.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and I've been using Eventbrite, since the very beginning. I remember the first Eventbrite event I went to and got a pocket of, or a bag of those Hot Pocket things.
The Pop Rocks?
The Pop Rocks, yes.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
We've been ripping off Pop Rocks for a long time. I'm waiting for them to give us a cease and desist letter.
But I've been watching Eventbrite grow over the past few years, and I just was wondering, where do you see you guys going 5 or 10 years from now?
So our mission is to bring people together through live experiences, and we find our inspiration from thinking about Eventbrite being ubiquitous with live experiences globally. And I think that'll take longer than 5 to 10 years, but for us, we will be an independent standalone company. What's really exciting is that now, through many years of hard work and growth, we're starting to see a global marketplace emerge. And that is exciting because it's not easy to build a marketplace. It's extremely challenging. And yet we're seeing some very strong marketplace dynamics happening where people are coming back to Eventbrite to find more live experiences to attend or be a part of. And for us, that truly is the dream, is to really build this global marketplace of live experiences. So it's all incremental growth towards that. And we feel like the sky's the limit. We're confident, but we're not unaware of all the challenges that lie in front of us and also all of the competition. It's a very noisy market. It's a very noisy market in part due to our success, but also because there's just a lot of people in this industry.
Now you made 2 acquisitions this last year. Are there more acquisitions in your future?
Yeah, it's interesting. We always were very keen on building versus buying, and then you hit this point where you realize that there are these amazing teams out there, and you probably shouldn't be so dogmatic. So it was one of the lessons that I've learned in terms of the 2 teams we found last year. Lanyard from the UK who are all now in San Francisco working with our engineering team, and Eventios, which is a ticketing company, a brilliant team in Latin America, you realize there is strength in these small pockets of talent around the world. So I would say that international is very interesting to us, but we still much prefer to build our technology in-house and really grow our team, from the core. But of course, there's always really interesting opportunities. So
You don't rule it out.
we don't rule it out. We don't have a very strong strategy though for acquisition.
Okay. Lots to look forward to. Any other questions? Last call? All right. I think that's it.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.